Stillness hung in the royal chambers like a physical presence, broken only by the soft hum of a holographic projection. The air carried a distinctive metallic tang, reminiscent of battleship corridors and medical bays, a scent Queen Lyria had long associated with absence and loss. Floating in the center of the dimly lit room, the damaged recording stuttered and flickered. Critical systems compromised, hull integrity failing. This is Commander Talia signing off. Then static. Only static for 7 years, repeating in an endless loop that seemed to measure time differently than the world outside. The Queen had rejected all suggestions to deactivate it. Court officials whispered she maintained it for historical reference. But the truth was more painful. She was waiting. Monarchs of Astoria were not meant to wait. They were meant to act, to lead, to shape destiny with decisive authority. Yet since the Hegemony War, since watching her daughter's vessel dissolve into incandescent plasma somewhere beyond the Corellan Rift, Lyria had existed in this suspended state between grief and hope. Throughout the rest of the crystalline palace, preparations for the Grand Concordat Summit created a stark contrast to the Queen's solitude. The luminescent corridors of Astoria hummed with activity as representatives from across the galactic spiral arrived for their annual gathering. A diplomatic performance where species who had recently been mortal enemies would exchange pleasantries while silently calculating advantages. Senior Protocol Minister Terran stood anxiously outside the royal chambers, his cybernetic enhancements pulsing with stress indicators. The implant that had replaced his left eye hadn't allowed him to blink in nearly 4 years, giving him the perpetually alert appearance that had become his trademark among the diplomatic corps. His transparent data panel displayed an ever-growing list of potential diplomatic incidents waiting to happen. "We have 15 species demanding special atmospheric accommodations," he said, scrolling through his data tablet. 3 sentient energy beings claiming diplomatic immunity for offenses they haven't even committed yet, and the human delegation is requesting something called pizza. Queen Lyria finally emerged from her chamber, dressed in subdued silver robes that matched her mood. Her azure skin, the characteristic hue of the Astorian royal bloodline, seemed almost pale in the soft light. Her elongated pointed ears were adorned with delicate silver ornaments, ceremonial, but sharp enough to serve as weapons if needed. "Let them have their pizza," she said, passing Baron without a second glance. Her voice carried the distinctive melodic quality of the Astorians, though it lacked the musical lilt it once had. "Let them feel like victors before they beg for favors. Yes, Your Majesty, also your cousin from the outer provinces has arrived and is already intoxicated on lumenberry wine." They moved through the palace toward the central assembly hall. The Queen walked slowly, as if carrying an invisible weight. Attendants with skin in various shades of blue bowed deeply as she passed, their traditional markings glowing faintly in deference. As she entered the grand hall, the murmur of the crowd quieted. 7 years had passed, yet whispers still followed her. Some claimed Talia had escaped to another dimension. Others insisted her consciousness had been uploaded into a rogue battleship that now patrolled the frontier. There was even a tale involving a space whale, though that was mostly spread by a bartender on Nova Station who got paid extra for creative stories. None of it mattered. The Queen knew what everyone else only speculated. Her daughter was gone. The evidence was overwhelming, and yet grief required something tangible, something to hold on to. As the Queen prepared to deliver her opening address, movement at the edge of the hall caught a few puzzled glances. The guards tensed, their chromed armor plates shifting silently. A figure stepped through the ornate archway, illuminated by the shifting blue light of the palace's solar dome. At first glance, it seemed like just another diplomat, perhaps late or boldly unconcerned with protocol. Then someone gasped, the kind of sound that ripples across a room like a wave. The Queen turned and froze. Talia stood in the doorway. Her stance showed exhaustion but determination. Her once pristine uniform was patched in places, scorched in others. Her blue skin bore new scars, thin silver lines that traced patterns across her exposed arms and face. Her long pointed ears twitched slightly, as if reacquainting themselves with the sounds of a home that had already mourned her. And beside her, because perfect moments were apparently not allowed in this universe, stood a human. He wore a battered flight jacket covered with mismatched patches, a slightly smug expression, and was halfway through eating what looked like a protein bar. His hair was a mess of unruly brown curls, and he had the look of someone who had been making things up as he went along for so long that it had become a lifestyle. The queen's voice failed her, but her legs moved on their own. She crossed the distance faster than anyone had ever seen her move, her formal robes flying behind her, her carefully arranged hair coming undone. Without ceremony or protocol, she simply ran and collided with her daughter in an embrace that sounded like both laughter and tears. Talia hugged back, awkwardly at first as though she had forgotten the mechanics of such gestures, then fiercely. "Sorry," she muttered, her voice raspier than it had once been. "Got a bit sidetracked." The human cleared his throat. "Hi, I'm Ren," he said with an easy casualness that made several nobles visibly flinch. "I kinda saved your daughter, though she saved me back at least 3 times, so I think we're even." He raised what remained of his protein bar in a toast-like gesture. "You're welcome. Also, do you have any real food?" Every guard in the room instantly aimed their weapons at him, the soft hum of charging phase disruptors filling the sudden silence. Talia stepped between Ren and the guards with practiced ease. "He's with me," she said firmly, the royal authority in her voice surprising even herself. "Don't shoot him. He breaks easily and complains constantly." Ren nodded solemnly. "Also, I think your security system tried to flirt with me on the way in. It asked about my core temperature preferences in a way that felt very personal." The queen looked from Talia to Ren and back again. "Explain," she commanded, her voice cracking in a way no monarch's voice should. Talia took a deep breath. "After the explosion, I was stranded on an abandoned mining moon. No communications, serious injuries, minimal supplies. This fool," she gestured to Ren, "found me while scavenging for parts, kept me alive with emergency patches and expired medication. We escaped pirates, a malfunctioning security drone, and something he called space flu, which I'm pretty sure was just bad food." Her fingers reflexively touched a silver scar that ran along her jawline. She hesitated, the bioluminescent markings on her neck pulsing with emotion she was trying to contain. "By the time I could send a message, the war was over. I thought it might be easier if I just stayed gone." Ren tried to lighten the moment. She was incredibly dramatic about it. Lots of staring into space. Actual space. One of the diplomats whispered loudly, "Are we still having the summit or—" The queen waved dismissively. "Cancel it. My daughter has returned. Everyone else can wait." Ren raised his hand. "Question. Is there a guest room with actual walls? I haven't slept somewhere that doesn't randomly lose pressure in about 3 years." Talia squeezed his hand, her blue fingers contrasting with his tan skin. "I warned you they'd be dramatic," he grinned. "You didn't mention the death glares. That tall guard over there has been mentally disintegrating me for the last 3 minutes." She looked at her mother, then at the assembled court. "This is Ren. He's impossible, but he's mine." The queen stepped forward and took Ren's other hand in hers. Her skin was cooler than human standard, with a faint pattern of bioluminescence that glowed beneath the surface. "Then he is ours," she said, the musical tones returning to her voice. There were about 1,000,000 ways to die in unregulated space, and Ren had flirted with at least 5 of them before breakfast each day. The first time he saw Talia, she was unconscious, half buried under a collapsed engine housing, surrounded by flickering emergency lights and the wreckage of what had once been an impressive military escape pod. Her ship had punched a crater into the mining moon's surface that looked like a cosmic exclamation point. The mining facility, extraction .573 according to the faded markers, had been abandoned for at least a decade. The Hegemony Corporation had pulled out when the lunar crust proved too unstable for deep mining, leaving behind equipment too costly to transport and environmental systems too old to bother salvaging. Ren had been tracking an unusual energy signature for 3 days, hoping it might be a forgotten cache of quantum batteries or perhaps an abandoned shuttle with working parts. What he found instead was a newly formed impact crater and a ship design unlike anything he'd seen before. He'd come looking for salvage, Instead, he found a blue-skinned woman bleeding a disturbing shade of indigo, breathing in shallow, labored gasps, and noticeably pointy in the ear department. Her skin had a faint luminescence beneath the surface, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. "Well," he'd muttered, checking her vital signs, "this is either a rescue or the beginning of a very complicated hostage situation." It took 3 days to stabilize her enough to sit up, 2 more before she would speak to him without reaching for a ceremonial-looking blade that had somehow survived the crash intact. The blade, he later learned, was a royal sentinel, traditionally given to members of the Astorian elite forces. She didn't tell him who she was at first. She said her name was Tali and that she was a navigator, which might have been more convincing if she hadn't tried to fix a navigation unit by reciting what sounded like a royal proclamation over it. The mining moon had no official name, just a numeric designation. It consisted mainly of unstable rock formations, unpredictable atmospheric disturbances, and rumors of a maintenance robot that still wandered the tunnels asking for instructions. Wren claimed to have glimpsed it once and named it Herbert. Wren's ship, if you could dignify the cobbled-together parts with such a term, was a modified cargo shuttle with temperamental engines and a habit of making alarming grinding noises during atmospheric entry. He'd named it the Lucky Break, which had proven to be more ironic than accurate on multiple occasions. They stayed hidden in the abandoned facility while Talia recovered. Talia needed time to heal. Her physiology was similar enough to human to benefit from Wren's medical supplies, but different enough that each treatment was a calculated risk. The glowing patterns beneath her skin provided helpful feedback. When they brightened, he knew she was improving. When they dimmed, he knew to adjust his approach. Wren needed time to teach her the concept of seasoning food. She insisted on calling scrambled eggs processed protein matter and referred to coffee as neural stimulant fluid. He maintained that anyone who didn't appreciate hot sauce was missing a fundamental part of the sentient experience. She nearly broke his arm the first time he called her princess, not realizing he had somehow guessed correctly. "That's a formal title requiring specific genetic lineage," she'd said stiffly. "I am a navigation specialist." "Sure," he'd replied with a grin, "and I'm a luxury yacht salesman. Your uniform has more ceremonial details than a navigation specialist would wear, and you give orders in your sleep." The days blended together. They fixed things, they argued, they survived. The facility's environmental systems required constant attention. The oxygen recyclers were operating at minimum capacity. The water purification unit produced liquid that tasted vaguely metallic, and the temperature regulation frequently malfunctioned. They repaired an old communications array, only to discover that all transmissions were months out of date and mostly advertisements. Talia developed an unexpected fondness for human entertainment programs. Wren caught her laughing at a comedy about colonists who accidentally created sentient moss. She denied it. He never let her forget it. The protagonist's confusion regarding ethical implications was instructive, she'd claimed. "You laughed when the moss formed a hand shape and gave the colony director an obscene gesture," he'd countered. "I was contemplating the complex symbolism. You snorted so hard you choked on your water." One evening, after narrowly avoiding being crushed by a collapsing tunnel, they sat together watching the stars through a cracked viewport. The gas giant that the moon orbited filled half the sky, its swirling storms creating patterns of amber and deep crimson. "Have you ever lost someone?" she asked without turning to look at him. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin had dimmed to almost nothing. Wren nodded slowly, his usual smile fading. "My sister, transport pilot. Ship disappeared near the Vale Nebula. Official report said navigation error. Unofficially, pirates. I stopped believing official reports after that." She was quiet for a while. "My entire squadron, we were supposed to break through the enemy blockade. My ship was designated as the diversion. We took heavy fire before we even reached position. I ordered evacuation when our core destabilized." She paused. "I ejected. They didn't." Wren offered her half of his protein bar. "This tastes like sadness and artificial sweetener," he said. "But it's the last one with chocolate bits." She accepted it. "Your taste buds are defective. This contains no nutritional value beyond basic calories. I survived 4 years of flight school on these. One instructor swore they were part petroleum byproduct. That explains a lot about your cognitive functions. When the main power grid failed during a storm, she rewired it using parts from a broken food synthesizer and knowledge that seemed far beyond what a navigator should possess. When he got stuck in a ventilation shaft retrieving a lost toolkit, she laughed so hard she fell off her ladder. Your posterior is too large for the shaft dimensions, she'd observed, still chuckling. My posterior is perfectly proportioned, he'd replied, his voice muffled. It's the shaft that's been improperly manufactured. When they found the maintenance robot, the one asking for orders, it turned out to be designated Unit 7, with half its programming corrupted. It primarily wanted to play strategy games, having repurposed its mining algorithms for recreation. Talia beat it in 10 moves. Unit 7 shut down for 3 days, apparently processing its defeat. 6 months passed like this. A strange limbo of survival and gradual recovery. Then they discovered the transmission beacon, buried beneath debris in an old communication center, wrapped in protective foil like someone's last desperate message to the stars. Talia decoded it within an hour. The message contained details about the interstellar summit on Astoria, a chance to reconnect with her world. Her eyes widened as she read, the patterns beneath her skin brightening. Ren watched her as she studied the coordinates. "Are you sure?" he asked. "They think you're dead. That's going to be an awkward family reunion." She didn't smile. "They'll want proof. DNA scan, security clearance verification, endless questions I don't have answers to." Her voice dropped lower. "Questions about why I didn't return sooner." He tried to help. "You could always just start over. New identity. Call yourself Stella Stardust or something equally subtle. Open a repair shop on some quiet colony world." She gave him an exasperated look. "Your naming suggestions lack creativity and would fool no one with access to basic genetic scanning technology." "Fine," he said, grinning, "but if they have a formal ceremony, I refuse to wear anything with a collar. They chafe, and I have sensitive skin." Talia didn't respond immediately. She stood, paced the small cabin, her movements transforming from the casual gait she'd adopted during their time together to something more measured, more deliberate. The walk of someone who had been trained since childhood to be observed. "I don't know how to go back," she finally said. "I'm not who I was." Ren leaned back, hands behind his head. "I don't think you're supposed to be. You survived an explosion, a crash, and 6 months of my cooking. Anyone who comes out of that unchanged is probably a robot." He glanced at Unit 7. "No offense, Herbert. Designation Unit 7 acknowledges. No offense registered," the robot replied. She looked at Ren, the corner of her mouth twitching slightly. "What if they don't accept me? What if they've moved on?" The patterns beneath her skin shifted to a darker blue. "They will," he said with more confidence than he felt. "You're Talia, and if they don't, I'll threaten them with a strongly worded complaint. Maybe a small explosion. I've gotten pretty good at those. Mostly by accident, but still." The journey to Astoria took a week aboard the Lucky Break, which protested the entire way with alarming noises and occasional systems failures. They made 3 unscheduled stops for emergency repairs, once when the atmospheric recyclers began producing a gas that made Ren hallucinate briefly about singing asteroids. Once when the gravitational stabilizers inverted polarity and sent everything not secured flying to the ceiling. And once when the main engine simply shut down in the middle of a debris field. They navigated through jump gates and uncharted systems, dodging 2 bounty hunters and an asteroid field that seemed to have a personal vendetta. Ren managed to modify a diplomatic transponder, using parts from Talia's emergency beacon and pieces of the food synthesizer. Talia watched him work with a mixture of fascination and horror. "Is this normal for humans? This haphazard approach to critical systems?" "I prefer to call it creative problem-solving," he replied, connecting wires that probably shouldn't be connected. "You'd be amazed how many things can be fixed with improvised solutions. This technique once got me through a blockade by convincing their sensors I was a waste disposal vessel. Nobody stops the garbage ship." The palace loomed ahead as they approached Astoria, a magnificent structure of crystal and light that seemed to grow directly from the planet's surface. Towers spiraled upward, connected by transparent bridges that sparkled in the light of the twin suns. Ren adjusted the ship's approach, trying to appear more confident than he felt. The Lucky Break looked woefully out of place among the sleek, pristine ships of the visiting dignitaries. Talia exhaled slowly. You don't have to come in with me. You could wait here, or even leave if you wanted. Your obligation ended when my injuries healed. He glanced at her, noting how the luminescent patterns beneath her skin had formed intricate swirling designs he'd never seen before. You really think I've survived all this just to miss the dramatic finale? That violates basic storytelling principles. I'm serious, Ren. Her voice had taken on the formal quality that emerged when she was stressed. This isn't simple. You could be detained, interrogated, or worse. He reached over and took her hand, feeling the slight coolness of her skin against his. The luminescent patterns brightened at his touch, spreading up her arm like ripples. So could you. Silence hung between them. Finally, she nodded. Fine, but if they execute you, I'll be mildly annoyed. He smiled. Such overwhelming sentiment. I'm touched. The docking bay opened like a waiting mouth as the ship touched down with a series of concerning noises. Maintenance droids stationed around the bay visibly recoiled at the state of the Lucky Break and the alarming fluid that began to leak from its undercarriage upon landing. Ren felt his stomach tighten. Not exactly fear, just the quiet realization that everything was about to change. And somewhere beneath that, the hope that maybe they might finally get a meal that didn't come from a tube. He turned to her one last time before the airlock opened. Ready? Talia's ears twitched slightly, an involuntary response he'd come to recognize as anxiety. No. He grinned. Perfect. Ren had never met royalty before, but he was pretty sure they weren't supposed to cry on your shoulder, especially not in front of an assembly of visiting dignitaries. Queen Lyria hadn't let go of her daughter in what felt like minutes, which left Ren standing awkwardly nearby. The palace guards had eventually lowered their weapons, though at least 3 still watched him as if he might suddenly decide to steal the throne or raid the kitchen. The guards wore armor that seemed to be a blend of technology and artistry, with plates that shifted and adjusted automatically to their movements. One particularly stern guard whispered something about his jacket violating at least 12 diplomatic dress codes. The Grand Hall was even more impressive from the inside. A vast open space with walls of living crystal that hummed with subtle energy. The ceiling was a dome of transparent material that filtered the harsh sunlight into a gentle blue glow. Diplomats from dozens of worlds stood in clusters, their varied physiologies representing the diversity of the interstellar alliance. Talia finally stepped back from her mother's embrace. Mother, this is Ren, she said, gesturing toward him with a formality that almost made him laugh after months of casual interaction. Ren, this is my mother, Queen Lyria, sovereign of Astoria, guardian of the 7 systems, and keeper of the eternal flame. She gave him a pointed look. She rules half a sector and can have you executed with a gesture. Try to be polite. I brought food, he offered lamely, holding up his protein bar. Several nearby diplomats visibly recoiled. The queen blinked at him, her luminescent patterns shifting in what might have been confusion. He communicates better when not surrounded by armed guards and staring dignitaries, Talia muttered. I apologize, Ren said, trying to sound more diplomatic. I'm just trying to process whether this is the most awkward meet the parents moment in galactic history or merely in the top 5. The queen tilted her head. He is unusual. Talia crossed her arms. He has his uses. Ren attempted a bow that looked more like he was checking if his shoes were tied. Mostly in emergencies and card games. I taught Her Highness how to play poker. She's terrifyingly good at bluffing. The queen stepped forward. You kept my daughter alive. Ren shrugged. She did most of the hard work. I just identified which fungi weren't poisonous and occasionally caught her when she passed out from blood loss. He paused. Which wasn't often. Mostly she was terrifyingly competent even while bleeding. Talia glanced sideways at him. You make me sound helpless. You were bleeding from 3 different places when I found you. One of them was your ear. I didn't even know ears could bleed that much. Queen Lyria's expression wavered between royal composure and maternal relief. Instead of embracing her daughter again, she simply nodded. You are both safe now. That is what matters. It turned out to be a lie. 40 minutes after the queen ordered a medical team to examine Talia and the palace chef to prepare anything that doesn't come from a tube or packet, the High Council demanded an emergency session. Counselors from 12 different planets had heard about the princess's return and arrived faster than light speed. Ren wasn't allowed in the council chamber, not because of protocol, but because he'd accidentally triggered the security system while trying to find the bathroom, which somehow initiated a lockdown and a 15-minute warning about potential dimensional breaches. He apologized profusely, then wandered off to explore. The palace artificial intelligence, named Nova, seemed to find him fascinating. "You have an interesting facial structure," it announced as soon as he entered the guest suite. Ren jumped. "That's either a compliment or an insult, and I'm not sure which." "I analyze physical characteristics as part of security protocols," Nova explained cheerfully. A small holographic projection materialized in front of him. "Your features register as aesthetically pleasing by 78% of known sentient species. Additionally, your heart shows an irregular rhythm when near Princess Talia. I feel both flattered and slightly violated." He examined the guest suite, which was larger than the entire living area they'd shared on the mining moon. Meanwhile, Talia stood before the council, rigid and silent as her mother explained the situation. The councilors represented major powers within the alliance, each with their own agenda and interest in the return of a princess long thought dead. They asked endless questions. How had she survived? What were the extent of her injuries? Was her return politically motivated? Had she made contact with enemy forces during her absence? What did the human know? Had he seen any sensitive information? Talia answered each question directly, her royal training evident in the careful precision of her responses. When she finished her account, a Minervan counselor leaned forward, light refracting through his crystalline form. "And the human? You vouch for him? Our intelligence suggests he has a rather colorful history." "Yes, he's just a mechanic." Her voice remained steady, but the luminescent patterns beneath her skin betrayed a flash of protectiveness. "His past is irrelevant to the current situation." "He seems to be more than that," the queen interjected, surprising Talia with her perception. Talia hesitated. "He rebuilt a ship's gravity generator using spare parts and determination. He broke through a pirate encryption system using a children's puzzle game. He got me off that moon, and he's not a spy." She paused. "He thinks spicy food is a measure of cultural advancement and has strong opinions about something called coffee that he tried to recreate using synthesized compounds. The result was both inedible and briefly toxic." A Centaurian representative tilted its compound eyes. "A reasonable hypothesis regarding spice nutrition. The correlation between complex flavor profiles and technological advancement has been documented across 17 distinct evolutionary paths." Elsewhere, Ren wandered through the guest wing and found himself in what appeared to be a communal area designed for informal diplomatic interactions, including a zero-gravity relaxation chamber occupied by 3 floating diplomats and a hovering drink tray. One of them waved. "You must be the human," said a 4-armed envoy with glowing tattoos that shifted position across its skin. "We've heard all about you. The princess's rescuer." "Great," Ren said. "I have no idea where I am. I was looking for food." "You're in the interspecies relaxation sphere. Would you like a beverage that tastes like your childhood? The molecular synthesizer can extract flavor memories directly from brain patterns." "That sounds vaguely threatening." The diplomat's tattoos formed a pattern that might have been laughter. "It should. The Minervan delegation used it last summit and complained of tasting their larval stage for days afterward." He declined the drink but accepted what appeared to be a snack cube that hummed slightly when touched and changed flavor every few seconds. On his way back, he encountered a very confused ambassador from the Hive Collective who asked if humans always had so many teeth visible. Ren just smiled wider. When he returned to the royal quarters, Talia was already there, sprawled on a couch that seemed to adjust itself to perfectly fit her form. Her formal uniform was rumpled, and her expression hovered between exhaustion and irritation. "How was the political interrogation?" Ren asked, dropping onto an adjacent chair that immediately conformed to his body. "Whoa, your furniture is aggressively comfortable. I'd rather go back to the mining moon." Talia ran a hand through her hair. At least there, the only things trying to kill me were environmental failures in your cooking. Did they torture you with questions? Extract your deepest secrets? They called it a strategic reintegration assessment. Apparently, being presumed dead for 7 years requires extensive documentation to become officially alive again. Sounds less painful than when you broke your leg and refused pain medication because you didn't trust my medical scanner. I didn't trust your medical unit. It smelled like burnt plastic and made noises that medical equipment should not make. It was literally made from parts of a cleaning robot and a food synthesizer. Talia sighed, then patted the couch beside her. The furniture obligingly expanded. The council is watching. Everyone is watching. I need to be perfect, composed, royal. The formal facade cracked slightly. I spent 6 years as a ghost, and now I'm expected to step back into a role I'm not sure fits anymore. Ren sat down next to her. You threw a wrench at my head once because I called you Your Highness after you'd spent 3 hours elbow deep in engine coolant. That was before you'd earned the right to use royal titles so casually. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. And it was a calibration tool, not a wrench. He grinned. It was heavy and metal and nearly took my eye out. Should I feel honored that I can now call you princess without risking cranial injury, or worried that your aim has improved? Both! A soft chime interrupted them. The queen entered without waiting for permission. The council accepts your return, she said. They are less convinced about your companion. Ren stood up, suddenly aware of how much snack residue was on his shirt. They will require evidence of his intentions. Perhaps even, he stays, Talia said firmly, rising to stand beside him. If they need proof, they can review the last 6 months of my logs. Every argument, every meal, every moment. He earned his place. Ren blinked. You recorded our conversations? I'm very thorough. Standard protocol for Astorian military personnel in emergency situations. The queen looked at them both, her gaze moving between them as if mapping connections invisible to others. Finally, she nodded. Very well, but if he insults the High Speaker of the Minervan delegation again, I won't protect him. The Minervans take great pride in their sensory filaments. In my defense, Ren said, he really does look like a sentient mop, the kind with the fancy absorbent tendrils. Very dignified, but definitely mop adjacent. Talia's mouth twitched. You're doomed. He leaned back. Worth it. And for the first time in a long time, the palace didn't feel like a prison to Talia. It felt like the beginning of something new. Talia had 3 assassination attempts before lunch on the second day. The first was a nanotoxin hidden in her morning tea, detected only because Ren's paranoia had finally paid off, and he insisted on scanning everything with a modified sensor he'd cobbled together. He'd named the device Danger Detector, and it resembled a kitchen appliance with too many blinking lights. Do you name all your devices? She asked, watching the detector emit an alarming series of beeps when held over her cup. Ren held it up triumphantly as palace security confirmed his findings. Only the ones that save lives, which is most of them, come to think of it. Danger Detector has earned a promotion. He's now chief of beverage safety. The second attempt came in the form of a reprogrammed cleaning drone designed to accidentally vacuum her into a waste disposal unit. It had excellent timing, waiting until Talia was separated from her security detail, and terrible aim, activating its enhanced suction while still too far away to be effective. Ren managed to disable it by throwing himself bodily onto the unit and prying open its control panel with a decorative letter opener he'd pocketed just in case. He reprogrammed it and renamed it Sonnet after discovering it had cultural programming in its memory banks. This drone knows more poetry than I do, he explained to the confused security team as the unit began reciting ancient Astorian verses. The third attempt came via diplomatic channels. A crystalline ambassador whose traditional greeting involved a handshake that would have delivered a powerful electrical charge. Ren intercepted it by tripping over a decorative carpet, colliding with a serving drone, and accidentally knocking over an ornamental vase. The resulting splash shorted out the ambassador's conductive glove. Ren claimed it was heroism. Talia was 90% sure it was just clumsiness. Security footage later analyzed was inconclusive, but showed him looking suspiciously at the ambassador seconds before the accident. Regardless of the method, Her return had clearly ruffled some political feathers. The Astorian intelligence service became noticeably active throughout the palace, with agents disguised as everything from service personnel to ornamental plants. "You're a political lightning rod," Wren observed over breakfast, pouring syrup on what looked like compressed algae with decorative fruit. "Every faction that thought they had a clear path to power now has to recalculate because the presumed dead princess is back." "I'm royalty," Talia replied. "Everything I do is political. Even my presumed death had political implications. The succession plans had to be completely restructured. The palace had implemented new security protocols, including retinal scans, DNA verification, and an honor guard of 12 heavily armed soldiers with enhanced reflexes and neural implants. The guards wore armor in the royal colors, deep blue with silver accents, and carried weapons that appeared ceremonial but contained cutting-edge technology. Talia accepted it stoically. Wren tried to get the guards to laugh by naming each one after breakfast foods. He got as far as Captain Cereal before one of them muttered, "Please stop," in a tone that suggested immediate compliance might be in his best interest. "Did you hear that?" Wren asked excitedly. "They can speak." "I thought they were communicating telepathically." "I am physically incapable of ignoring nonsense beyond certain parameters," the guard admitted, looking like he immediately regretted breaking his silence. Despite the threats, Talia refused to stay locked away. She returned to the strategy chamber, reviewed reports from the outer colonies, and answered hundreds of personal messages from allies, enemies, and one very confused fan who thought she was a character from a popular virtual reality show. The Queen insisted she take it easy. "I just got back," Talia argued. "I don't want to disappear again behind security protocols and royal isolation." "You're not disappearing," Queen Lyria said. "You're being protected, like a treasure, like a target." The patterns beneath her skin formed complex structures that matched her daughter's. "There are those who saw opportunity in your absence, who rebuilt their power structures around the reality of your death." Wren watched the mother-daughter standoff while eating snacks made by the palace's food synthesizer. Eventually, a compromise was reached. Talia would attend the Unity Festival, an annual event celebrating interstellar peace that had been established after the last major conflict. The festival took place on a floating city in the skies of Elysium Prime, a gas giant with 16 moons that served as a neutral meeting ground for the Alliance. The entire city hovered over an ocean of liquid metals and crystal formations, with occasional energy beings that might have been native life forms or just tourist attractions. "Did that one wave at me?" Wren asked, pointing to a swirling pattern of light. Talia didn't look up from adjusting her ceremonial armor. "If it proposes marriage, say yes. They make better partners than most politicians." The city's central spire broadcast holographic celebrations across the system. Talia's appearance would be streamed live to billions across the Alliance, her return serving as both news and symbol. "I don't like being used as a symbol," she said in the preparation room. "Symbols don't get headaches or have to smile for hours while wearing uncomfortable ceremonial armor." "You're doing great," Wren replied, tugging at his formal clothes. "Why am I even here? Emotional support, backup, comic relief. Also, someone has to make sure you don't accidentally activate the gravity controls again." She frowned. "That happened once, and it was because you told me the big red button was probably the refreshment call." The ceremony began with dancers from 7 worlds, orbital choirs, and one acrobatic team from a low-gravity planet who accidentally floated away mid-performance. Talia stepped forward when announced, emerging onto the central platform to thunderous applause. Her face remained calm, her hands steady as she acknowledged the crowd. Then the stage exploded. Not completely, just enough to send half the audience into panic and the royal guards into action. A localized detonation that created a cloud of smoke that obscured the central platform. Talia's instincts kicked in immediately, shield up, movement low and controlled, eyes scanning for threats. The ceremonial armor activated additional protective features, a shimmer of energy forming around her. Wren had reacted too, though in a less trained manner. He had tackled a flying object midair before realizing it was actually a malfunctioning celebration drone filled with confetti and slightly too much propellant. "False alarm!" he yelled, coughing up glitter and tiny holographic peace symbols. "Just a party drone!" But the real danger came seconds later. A cloaked figure dropped from above, weapons drawn, armor reflecting light in patterns designed to confuse visual targeting systems. The intruder moved with military precision, not aiming for Talia, but for the queen. Talia intercepted with a kinetic blast from a weapon concealed within her ceremonial gauntlet, sending the attacker spinning through the air. Ren got there next using a shock baton he'd borrowed from Captain Serial earlier. The attacker's helmet came off when they collided with a decorative column. It was someone Talia knew, the recognition immediate and visceral, causing the luminescent patterns beneath her skin to flare with shock. "Darren," she said, voice hollow. "Commander Darren." He grinned, indigo blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "You should have stayed dead, princess." It was a better ending to the story. Later in the palace dungeons, Ren stared through the energy field at the prisoner. Darren had been stripped of his armor and weapons, but he maintained a military posture even while seated. "Ex-friend?" Ren asked, glancing at Talia. Talia glared at him. "Long-lost cousin? Evil clone? Twins separated at birth?" "Lieutenant Commander Darren Vex," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "From my squadron. Senior tactical officer. He believed I betrayed the mission when I ejected instead of going down with the ship. He tried to kill your mom. That seems like an extreme response to a disagreement about emergency protocols. He always was ambitious. Darren believed in victory at any cost. Survival was secondary to completing the mission." Darren didn't speak for hours. When he finally did, it was through clenched teeth. "The Unity Council isn't unified," he said, looking directly at Talia. "Half the systems are breaking away. The border worlds are in open rebellion. You were a martyr, a symbol of sacrifice. Now you're a problem." Talia crossed her arms. "You think I care about their comfort? About maintaining a political fiction? I think you don't realize how much power you've disrupted just by coming back." Darren leaned forward. "You were dead. Resources were reallocated. Agreements were made. Powers shifted. And now the lost princess returns, with a human of questionable background, telling a story that raises more questions than it answers." Ren scratched his chin. "Can I make an observation?" "No," Talia muttered, but not quickly enough. "You guys have terrible internal communication. Galaxy-changing secrets are being passed around like viral dance moves. There should be a newsletter or something." Darren didn't laugh, his attention fixed solely on Talia. "They'll use you," he said quietly, "either as a puppet or as a target." Ren turned to Talia. "So what's next? Parade? Trial? New assassination attempt?" The chef knew about the cleaning drone before security did, by the way. Kitchen staff has the best intelligence network. Talia looked out through the window at the endless sky beyond. "Next," she said, her voice taking on the quality of command, "we make a list of every person who wishes I was still dead." Sounds like a long list. "We've got time," Ren smiled. "Want me to alphabetize it? Color coding by threat level and maybe little annotations about their preferred assassination methods." She handed him a data pad with security clearance that would have made palace intelligence very nervous if they knew about it. Darren's escape attempt 3 days later was thwarted by an unlikely alliance between a malfunctioning guard robot, an over-enthusiastic cleaning droid that Ren had reprogrammed, and Ren's insistence on installing motion-triggered confetti dispensers in the hallway for morale. "They're festive," Ren explained to the bewildered security team, as glitter rained down on the unconscious prisoner. "And surprisingly distracting. Most beings will pause when unexpectedly showered with shiny objects." Talia stared at the scene. "Did you wire confetti into the security system?" "Maybe." He avoided her gaze. "There might also be a subroutine that plays celebratory music when certain types of security breaches are detected." Darren was taken back into custody before he could activate the explosive device hidden in his boot, though not before telling Talia that she'd started a war just by surviving. The political landscape was realigning around her reappearance, some seeing opportunity, others threat. His final words before sedation: "They'll never let you take that throne. You're too unpredictable now, too changed. They need someone they can control." Ren leaned against the wall. For a guy so obsessed with politics, he really needs a course in personal interaction. Hello works better than I'm going to blow up this whole section of the palace. Talia didn't respond. She was staring at the floor, her luminescent patterns forming complex designs that reflected deep thought. A strategic mind cataloging information, making connections, seeing patterns where others might see only chaos. The Queen called an emergency session of the Unity Council the following day. By all accounts, it was a disaster. Half the delegates questioned Talia's loyalties, suggesting that 6 years away might have compromised her. Several accused her of conspiring with humans to destabilize the government. One representative demanded she undergo a full neural truth scan, which Wren firmly opposed after reading the side effects, which included temporary paralysis, uncontrollable honesty, and in rare cases, speaking exclusively in rhyming couplets for months. "You're losing them," Wren said after the meeting, as they retreated to the royal gardens, one of the few places with minimal surveillance. Bioluminescent flowers cast a gentle glow over the path, while floating orchids drifted on artificial currents. "They're afraid of you." "They should be." Talia ran her fingers along a crystalline bloom that hummed at her touch. "That's not reassuring. Fear makes people do stupid things." She turned to him. "What would you have me do? Smile more? Bake cookies? Pretend that everything is fine and that I'm the same person who left 7 years ago? I'd eat them. The cookies, not the council members." Talia sat down on a bench made from living wood that adjusted its shape to accommodate her. She pulled off her gloves, revealing the intricate patterns beneath her skin. "I came back hoping to rebuild something, but maybe it's already gone. Maybe the world I knew doesn't exist anymore." Wren took a deep breath. "You're asking the wrong question." "Oh, you're asking how to fix the past, how to return to what was. But maybe it's time to build something new." He sat beside her, watching as a flying creature that resembled a butterfly drifted past. The old system was already breaking down. That's why there was a war in the first place. She looked at him. "You want me to start a revolution? Overthrow my own mother?" "Only if we can name it something dramatic, like Operation Phoenix Rising or the Great Cosmic Reset." He gestured expansively. "I've always wanted to be part of something with an impressive title." "You're an idiot. An inspirational idiot. It's an important distinction." Talia laughed. It was short, tired, but genuine, a sound that had been rare since their return. She stood, new determination in her posture. "Let's make a list." They did. Not of enemies this time, but of people and places throughout the 7 systems. Honest administrators who had been sidelined, fragmented worlds caught between competing powers. Leaders on the edge colonies who put their people before politics. Worlds exploited for resources but denied representation. Scientists without funding, refugees without homes, soldiers without purpose. Talia didn't try to reclaim the throne in the traditional sense. She redefined it. Within 2 weeks, operating from what had once been her personal study, she'd announced the formation of a new alliance, separate from the council, a coalition of systems that valued transparency, resilience, and, to Wren's delight, regular meal breaks during strategy meetings. The media called it the Phoenix Accord after Talia's symbol, a stylized bird rising from flame. The Queen didn't resist. She didn't endorse it either. She simply watched her daughter work, sometimes offering quiet guidance, but never interference. She had ruled long enough to recognize when systems needed to evolve. Talia spoke to thousands across the stars. No crown, no titles, just truth about the challenges facing worlds beyond the central systems. The corruption that had taken root. The need for a new approach to governance. Wren spoke too, usually after tripping over something or accidentally switching the translation matrix. One speech was entirely mistranslated as a formal declaration of war on breakfast foods, causing a panic on an agricultural world until Talia issued a clarification. Despite these mishaps, his perspective as an outsider proved valuable. Talia appointed him special diplomatic consultant and immediately rewrote the job description to include a clause forbidding unsupervised interviews. The latter requirement came after he attempted to improve the palace communications system and accidentally broadcast a private conversation about the Queen's footwear to every diplomatic residence in the capital. Over time, the new alliance gained ground. The threats didn't disappear, but they diminished. Darren's faction collapsed when intercepted communications revealed he'd once tried to blackmail a diplomat using embarrassing dance footage from a resort planet. Trust, it turned out, was a better currency than fear, though it took longer to accumulate and required constant maintenance. The night before they left the palace on what would be the first of many diplomatic missions, Talia stood on the balcony with Ren beside her. Below, the capital city glimmered with peaceful lights. Above, ships passed like fireflies against the darkness. "Do you regret it?" she asked, her voice soft. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin had formed a constellation-like design of contentment. "What? The near-death experiences? The royal intrigue? The fact that I haven't had a decent burger in 6 months?" He counted on his fingers. "The time I almost got executed for calling a diplomat a walking chandelier?" She nudged him with her elbow, a gesture that had become familiar between them. "No," he said, his voice unusually serious. "I don't regret a thing." She looked at him. "You never asked why I held your hand that day when we came back, in front of everyone. I figured you were using me as a shield against over-enthusiastic security personnel. Partially, but also because you were the only real thing I had left." She turned back to the view. Everything else felt like a dream. Or perhaps the mining moon was the dream, and this was the waking. Either way, you were the only constant. He smiled. "Well, now you've got a galaxy, or at least 7 systems and some enthusiastic allies. And you, Ren." She glanced at him. "What do you have now?" He stretched his arms. "I've got a galaxy and a confetti launcher with security clearance. Also, I've convinced the kitchen staff to teach me how to make that blue dessert you pretend not to like but have eaten 4 times this week." They stood in comfortable silence. The Queen joined them briefly. "You changed everything," she said to Talia. "No," Talia replied. "I just stopped pretending I couldn't." The Queen touched her daughter's shoulder, tracing a pattern that held meaning in ancient Astorian tradition. "Don't lose yourself in what you're building." Talia glanced at Ren. "I won't. He won't let me." The Queen nodded once, then left them to the night and the stars. The next morning they boarded the ship, Ren's ship mostly, though it had been significantly upgraded by royal engineers who couldn't bear to see the princess depart, what one had described as a navigation disaster waiting to happen. The Lucky Break had been rebuilt with enhanced systems, but it maintained its essential character: adaptable, surprising, resilient. Talia took the pilot's seat, her hands moving over the controls with confidence. Ren sat co-pilot, flipping switches that he now actually understood, thanks to training from the royal engineers who had been horrified by his intuitive approach to spacecraft operation. "Where to first?" he asked as the engines hummed to life. She smiled slightly. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin formed a design of possibility. "Anywhere that needs a little hope." He adjusted the navigation, plotting a course to everywhere. Then the engines roared, the stars tilted, and they were gone. For